I'm Maya, I'm 31 years old, I'm a female, and the core of my story is this. My parents gave my cherished, renovated lake cabin to my younger sister as a surprise gift, so I had it legally stripped to the studs and then gifted them the empty, worthless shell. The whole fiasco began, as most of my family's dramas do, with a celebration for my sister Olivia. This time, it was her baby shower. The air in my parents' meticulously manicured backyard was thick with the scent of hydrangeas and the saccharine sweetness of pink lemonade. Laughter tinkled, pastel-colored balloons bobbed in the gentle breeze, and at the center of it all my sister, Liv, glowed. At 27, pregnant with her first child, she was the sun around which our family had always orbited. I watched from the periphery, nursing a glass of sparkling water, a familiar ache of invisibility settling in my chest. This feeling wasn't new. It was a well-worn coat I'd been forced to put on since childhood. The dynamic was simple. Olivia was the star and I was the stagehand. I was the reliable one, the steady one, the one who quietly achieved things without any fuss. Liv was the one who made a fuss, and in our family, the fuss got the attention. I remember my 10th birthday. I had asked for a specific telescope, the kind that would let me see the rings of Saturn. I had a chart on my wall, circling the date I'd be able to see them most clearly. My parents, Carol and David, smiled and nodded, but on my birthday I unwrapped a set of encyclopedias. A long-term investment in your education, Maya, my father had said, beaming. 2 months later, for no reason other than a Tuesday, they bought Liv a pony. A real, living pony that she'd begged for after seeing a movie. The encyclopedias gathered dust while the pony became the star of our family Christmas card. Then there was the matter of college. I earned a full academic scholarship to study landscape architecture at a prestigious university. It was a point of pride for me, a testament to years of hard work. My parents' reaction was one of polite, almost distracted, approval. "Well, that's sensible, Maya," my mother had commented. "Good for you for saving us the money." When Liv decided she wanted to be a social media influencer, a career path that seemed as stable as a house of cards, they didn't just approve, they funded it. They paid for her apartment in the city, bought her professional camera equipment, and financed trips to photogenic locations so she could build her brand. Her successes, measured in likes and followers, were celebrated with champagne toasts at dinner. My graduation, where I received my degree with honors, was marked with a simple card. The most telling precursor to the cabin disaster, however, was the car. When I was 25, after saving for 2 years at my first architectural firm, I bought myself a reliable, safe, second-hand sedan. It was my first major purchase, a symbol of my independence. My father inspected it in the driveway, kicked the tires, and said, "A practical choice." Good. 6 months later, for Liv's 21st birthday, they leased her a brand-new convertible. It was cherry red, flashy, and completely impractical. When I gently pointed out the disparity, my mother had sighed, patting my arm with that infuriatingly placating gesture of hers. "Oh, Maya," she'd said, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. "You've always been so self-sufficient. Liv just needs a little more help. It's our job to provide that for her." It was then that I truly understood. My independence wasn't a trait to be celebrated, it was a pass for them to neglect me. My success meant they could focus all their resources, both financial and emotional, on my sister. I was, in essence, subsidizing her needs by taking care of my own. It was with this understanding firmly in place that I stood at her baby shower, an unwilling spectator to the grand finale of their lifelong favoritism. The party was reaching its peak. Gifts were piled high on a white wicker table, a mountain of pastel wrapping paper and cheerful bows. Liv had already opened a tidal wave of onesies, blankets, and ridiculously tiny shoes. I had given her a handcrafted wooden rocking horse, one I'd found at a local artisan market near the lake. It was a piece of timeless craftsmanship, something she could pass down. She'd smiled, said, "Oh, cute," and quickly set it aside to grab a box containing a designer diaper bag. I didn't let the sting show. I was used to it. Then my father clinked a glass, a familiar signal for a family announcement. He and my mother stood together, beaming, their faces alight with a self-congratulatory glow I knew all too well. "Attention, everyone, attention!" Dad's voice boomed across the yard. "Carol and I have one more gift for the parents-to-be. something a little too big to wrap. A murmur of excited anticipation went through the crowd. Liv clapped her hands together, her eyes wide with manufactured surprise. She was a performer, and this was her stage. My mother stepped forward, holding something large and flat, covered by a silk cloth. "Olivia, darling," she began, her voice quivering with emotion. "Your father and I know that starting a family is a huge step. You'll need space to grow, a place to make memories, a real home." With a dramatic flourish, she pulled the cloth away. Underneath was a giant, comically oversized key made of foam board, painted a glittering gold. Across the top, in bubbly pink letters, were the words, "Congratulations on your new home." My heart, which had been beating a steady, resigned rhythm, gave a sudden, painful lurch. It was just a prop, I told myself. They bought her a condo, maybe a starter home in the suburbs. It had nothing to do with me. But then my father spoke again, his voice thick with pride. "We know how much you've always loved the lake, sweetheart, so we bought you a house there." The air in my lungs turned to ice. A cold dread, sharp and suffocating, crept up my spine. No, I thought, they couldn't, the lake, my cabin. I had bought the small, dilapidated A-frame cabin 5 years ago with the first significant bonus I'd ever received. It was a wreck, rotting porch, leaky roof, windows that rattled with every breeze. But it was mine. The deed was in my name. The property taxes were paid from my bank account. For 5 years, every spare weekend, every vacation, every ounce of my creative energy and a significant portion of my income had been poured into that place. I'd learned how to lay hardwood floors, how to install windows, how to tile a bathroom. As a landscape architect, I'd transformed the overgrown, thorny plot into a sanctuary with stone pathways, terraced gardens, and a beautiful floating dock I'd designed myself. It was my escape, my passion project, my future. It was the only place on earth that felt truly mine. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Liv burst into theatrical tears, rushing to hug our parents. "Oh my God, you guys, a house, a whole house," she cried into our dad's shoulder. I stood frozen, rooted to the spot. It felt like the world had tilted on its axis, sound fading to a dull roar in my ears. It had to be a mistake, a different cabin. But then my mother's eyes found mine across the yard. She disengaged from the family hug and began walking toward me, a tight, knowing smile on her face. She saw the shock on my face, the utter disbelief. And she misinterpreted it as awe. She reached me and took my limp hand. "Isn't it wonderful, Maya?" she whispered, leaning in close so only I could hear. "Now the whole family can enjoy the lake." She must have finally registered the horror in my expression because her smile tightened, her eyes hardening slightly. "Don't be selfish, dear," she hissed, her voice a sliver of ice. "You were barely ever there. It was sitting empty half the time." Her next words struck me like a physical blow, knocking the last bit of air from my lungs. "Besides, it's family property now." Family property. The phrase echoed in the silent, screaming space in my head. The cabin that I had paid for, the deck I had built with my own 2 hands, the sink I had chosen, the dock where I drank my morning coffee, all of it erased with 4 little words. She squeezed my hand, a gesture meant to convey finality, not comfort. "We knew you'd understand. You've always been the practical one." I didn't argue, I didn't scream or cry or make a scene. A strange, glacial calm settled over me. The emotional part of my brain simply shut down, leaving only a cold, clear, calculating certainty. In that moment, standing in the sun-drenched yard surrounded by my beaming, triumphant family, I wasn't a daughter or a sister anymore. I was a property owner who had just been informed of a hostile takeover. And I knew, with absolute clarity, what I had to do. I pulled my hand from hers, gave her a blank, unreadable smile and turned away. The party could have their fantasy. I had work to do. I left the party without saying goodbye to anyone. I didn't trust myself to speak. The drive home was a blur of autopilot and suppressed rage. The glacial calm that had enveloped me at the party remained, a shield against the torrent of emotions churning just beneath the surface. Betrayal, hurt, fury, they were all there, but they were fuel now, not weaknesses. My mind was a machine, processing logistics with chilling efficiency. My parents had made a critical error. They assumed my silence was acceptance. They had mistaken my shock for surrender. They had always seen my self-sufficiency as a convenience for them. Now, they were about to see it as a weapon. I walked into my quiet apartment, the silence a stark contrast to the cloying cheerfulness of the baby shower. I dropped my keys on the counter and didn't even take off my jacket. I pulled out my phone, my fingers steady. It was 7:00 p.m. on a Saturday. Time was of the essence. Ka. LL1, the contractor. I scrolled through my contacts to Mark the demolisher Jensen. He was a gruff, no-nonsense salvage contractor I'd worked with on a professional project a year ago. His company specialized in 24/7 emergency services, mostly for fire or flood damage, but their real talent was speed and precision. They could dismantle a building with the skill of a surgeon. He answered on the second ring, his voice a gravelly bark. Jensen. Mark, it's Maya Evans, I said, my voice even and calm. I have a job for you, an unusual one, and it needs to happen tonight. There was a pause. Tonight, it's Saturday, Evans, that's triple time. I'm aware, I said, and I'll pay it plus a bonus for discretion and speed. I need a crew at my property on Silver Lake. I'll text you the address, I need it stripped. Stripped, he asked, a hint of professional curiosity in his tone. Define stripped. I want everything that isn't structural and load-bearing removed. I'm talking about all non-essential assets. The custom kitchen cabinetry, the appliances, the granite countertops, the hardwood flooring I installed, all interior and exterior doors, every window, the light fixtures, the ceiling fans, the bathroom vanity, the toilet, the sink, the shower fixtures. I want the wraparound deck I built dismantled, board by board. I want the floating dock I designed unmoored and removed from the water. I want it all taken away and put into a secure storage unit. I will own the salvage. I want the cabin reduced to its original, unimproved state, an empty shell of studs, subfloor, and a roof. Can you do that? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing. Lady, he finally said, a note of grudging respect in his voice, that's not a salvage job, that's a reckoning. You got the legal right to do this. It's your property, title in your name. The deed is in my name and my name alone. I have the documents to prove it. The crew will not be trespassing, I stated firmly. All right, he said, the deal sealed. My guys are on another job, but they can be at your place by 10 p.m. They'll work through the night. It'll look like a swarm of locusts went through there. It'll be bare by dawn. Send me the address and a copy of that deed. Thank you, Mark, I said. I'll transfer the deposit right now. I hung up, a cold satisfaction settling in my gut. One down. Call 2, the lawyer. My next call was to my lawyer, Catherine Webb. She was sharp, pragmatic, and had handled the legal paperwork when I first bought the cabin. She owed me a favor after I'd done some pro bono landscape design for her new office. I knew she wouldn't be in her office, so I called her personal number. Maya, is everything all right? She asked, her voice laced with concern. It was rare for me to call her outside of business hours. I'm fine, Catherine, but I have a situation, I said. I quickly and dispassionately explained what had happened at the baby shower, leaving out the emotional turmoil and sticking to the facts. The announcement, the gifting of my property, my mother's words. Catherine was silent for a moment, and I could practically hear the legal gears turning in her head. Good Lord, Maya, that's audacious doesn't even begin to cover it. I know. A crew is on its way to strip the cabin of all my personal assets and improvements right now, I told her. Good, she said immediately. That's the first step. They can't claim you've abandoned the property if you're actively removing things from it. What do you need from me? I need you to prepare 3 things for me by morning, I said, my plan crystallizing as I spoke. First, a formal trespass notice, effective immediately, for Carol Evans, David Evans, and Olivia Evans for the property at Silver Lake. I want it delivered by a legal courier tomorrow morning. Second, I need you to draft a document outlining the gift tax liability my parents have just created for themselves by gifting a property, even when they don't own. I want to know the approximate value they'll be on the hook for to the IRS. And third, I want you to prepare a quitclaim deed. I'm going to gift them the property. For real. Catherine gasped. My, are you sure, after all your work? I'm sure, I said, a bitter taste in my mouth. They want a lake house. They can have it. They can have the empty, worthless shell. They can have the land, the property tax bills that come with it, and the massive gift tax bill. And Catherine, I need one more thing. I need you to draft an invoice. For my 5 years of labor as a project manager and landscape architect on that cabin, billed at my full professional rate. If they want to call it family property, then the family can pay for the work I put into it. A slow smile crept into Catherine's voice. Maya, she said, this is the most beautifully brutal act of legal compliance I have ever witnessed. I'll get started right away. Yo. You'll have everything by 8 a.m. 2 down. Call 3, the property assessor. My final call was a bit more obscure. I found a 24-hour property assessment service online that specialized in rush jobs for insurance and legal purposes. It was expensive, but at this point, money was just a tool. A man with a tired voice answered. I explained what I needed. I need a full valuation of a property, but I need 2 versions of the report. The first is an assessment of the property's value as it stood at 5 p.m. today, fully renovated, furnished, landscaped. The second is an assessment of its value as it will stand at 6 a.m. tomorrow, a stripped, empty shell with no windows, doors, or utilities. Land value only, plus the raw structure. That's a strange request, the assessor said. It's for a legal matter, I replied smoothly. And I need it documented, time-stamped, and notarized. I can pay for the expedited service. As long as the check clears, he sighed. I can be out there at dawn. I'll meet your locusts. I hung up the phone, 3 down. The room was dark now, the sun having set long ago. I hadn't moved from the spot by the counter. My entire world had been upended in a matter of hours, but I had never felt more in control. They wanted my cabin. They wanted to erase my work, my ownership, my very presence in that space and claim it for themselves. They thought I would just roll over and accept it. They thought I would cry. They thought I would argue. They didn't realize that the quiet, self-sufficient daughter they had so carefully cultivated had also learned how to be ruthlessly efficient. They had started a fire, and now all I had to do was stand back and let them see what grew from the ashes. Sleep was impossible. I spent the night on my sofa, a cold cup of tea forgotten on the table beside me. My phone was a lifeline, a conduit to the quiet demolition happening miles away. Just after 10 p.m., Mark, the contractor, sent me a simple text. We're in. Throughout the night, my phone would buzz with updates. A picture of the custom-built kitchen island being carefully wrapped and wheeled out. A short video of the French doors being lifted from their hinges. A photo of the deck, disassembled into neat stacks of lumber. Each image was a fresh pang of loss, a reminder of the hours of joy and frustration I had poured into that place. But each image was also a confirmation that I was taking it back. I wasn't destroying my work, I was reclaiming it. They couldn't have it. If I couldn't have the cabin as my sanctuary, then they would not have it as their prize. At 4:52 a.m., a final text from Mark arrived. Job's done. The place is a skeleton. Storage unit is locked and sealed. Key is with me. Just as the first hint of gray light appeared in the sky, another email pinged. It was the property assessor. Attached were 2 password-protected PDF files. The first, titled Evans Property Valuation Pre-Removal, estimated the cabin's market value at a staggering number, factoring in the high-end finishes, the custom landscaping, and the waterfront location. The second, Evans Property Valuation Post-Removal, was a fraction of that. It was essentially the value of the raw land and a dilapidated structure, now officially classified as uninhabitable. At 8:15 a.m., a courier delivered a thick envelope from Catherine's office. Inside was the crisp, professionally printed stack of documents I had requested: the trespass notice, the quitclaim deed, the terrifyingly high gift tax calculation, and the meticulously itemized invoice for my 5 years of labor. Seeing them in print, official and unassailable, solidified my resolve. This wasn't just an emotional reaction anymore. It was a legally sound, financially devastating countermove. I spent the rest of the day in a strange limbo. I knew the storm was coming. I was just waiting for the first drops of rain. I tried to distract myself, tidying my already pristine apartment, but my ears were tuned for the buzz of my phone. It came at 6:17 p.m. My screen lit up with a message from Liv. My heart hammered against my ribs. I took a deep breath and opened it. The message was short, a perfect blend of confusion and entitlement. Hey, Mom and Dad gave me the keys to the cabin and I drove out to see it. This is weird. Why is the bathroom sink missing? For a moment, I was tempted to unleash everything. To type out a furious, multi-paragraph rant detailing every injustice, every slight, every moment of blatant favoritism I had endured. But I didn't. Cold, calculated calm was my armor. The plan was already in motion, and it was far more eloquent than any angry text could ever be. I typed back a simple, chilling reply. Wait until tomorrow. I hit send. Then I turned my phone off. There was nothing more to say. The rest of the conversation would be had via legal courier. The silence in my apartment was absolute. The next morning, Carol, David, and Olivia Evans would wake up to a brand new reality. They thought they had simply taken a house from their quiet, accommodating daughter. They were about to find out that they had declared war on a meticulous, well-prepared architect who had the blueprints for their destruction drawn up and ready to execute. The sink was just the beginning. The next morning, I woke up feeling strangely refreshed, as if I had purged a long-held poison from my system. I turned my phone back on around 9 a.m. It immediately exploded. A flurry of missed calls, 10 from my mother, 12 from my father, and 5 from Olivia. Then came the texts. They were a chaotic waterfall of outrage, confusion, and panic. Mom, Maya, what is the meaning of this? A man in a uniform just handed us legal papers. Call me now. Dad, you have gone too far. Trespassing, a bill, this is insane. We are your parents. Olivia, Maya, WTF is happening? Mom is crying and Dad is yelling about taxes. You can't kick me out of my new house. My baby is going to live there. Mom, Olivia is hysterical. How could you do this to your sister, after everything we've done for you? That last one almost made me laugh. Everything they'd done for me. I read through them all, my emotional detachment still firmly in place. They were words on a screen, the predictable death rattle of a toxic dynamic. The courier, Catherine had confirmed, had delivered the package at 8:45 a.m. sharp. I pictured the scene. My parents and Liv, likely having a celebratory breakfast, interrupted by a formal legal delivery. The initial confusion turning to horror as they read the documents. The trespass notice, banishing them from the property. The quitclaim deed, making them the proud, legal owners of a hollowed-out shell. The invoice for my labor, a 5-figure sum that would have made their eyes water. And the piece de resistance, the 2-page explanation from Catherine about federal gift tax law and the 6-figure tax bill they now owed the government for their grand gesture. My front door buzzer shrieked, sharp and insistent. I knew who it would be. I looked through the peephole to see all 3 of them, my mother, my father, and a visibly pregnant, tear-streaked Olivia, standing in the hallway of my apartment building. My father was practically vibrating with rage. I took a deep breath, straightened my shirt, and opened the door. Maya, my mother cried, pushing past me into my apartment as if she had every right to be there. My father and Liv followed, a phalanx of indignation. What is the meaning of this? My father demanded, waving the sheaf of papers from Catherine's office in his hand. Are you out of your mind? No, I said calmly, closing the door behind them. For the first time in a long time, I think I'm perfectly in my right mind. Please don't shout. Don't shout, he roared. You sick a lawyer on your own family, you send us a bill, like we're common clients. And this tax nonsense. It's not nonsense, Dad, I replied, my voice level. It's the law. When you gift something of significant value, the IRS takes an interest. You gifted a property. You now owe gift tax on its assessed value. Catherine was kind enough to calculate it for you. My mother stepped forward, her face a mask of wounded motherhood. But we gave the cabin to Olivia, she said, as if this explained everything. It was a gift for the baby. You can't give away something that doesn't belong to you, Mom, I said simply. But it's family property, she wailed, repeating the phrase that had started it all. No, I said, and my voice was hard as stone. It was my property, I bought it. I paid the mortgage. I paid the taxes. I renovated it with my own money and my own two hands. You had no legal or moral right to give it to anyone. Olivia, who had been sniffling in the background, finally spoke up. But you have this nice apartment, she said, gesturing around my modest but well-kept living room. I'm having a baby, I need a house. You don't need two places, Maya. The sheer, breathtaking entitlement of her statement finally cracked my composure. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. Need, I said, turning to her. You think this is about need? I needed that cabin, Liv. It was my sanctuary. It was the one place I could go to get away from this. From the constant, suffocating reality that in this family, you are the only one whose needs and wants ever matter. I looked from her to my parents. You know, I used to think you just didn't see me, but I was wrong. You saw me. You saw that I was responsible, that I was independent, and you used it as an excuse. You used my strength to justify my neglect. Every time I succeeded on my own, you took it as a sign that you could pour more resources into Liv. My scholarship meant more money for her lifestyle. My job meant you didn't have to worry about me, so you could worry exclusively about her. You didn't raise two daughters. You raised a star, and you raised her assistant. I picked up my own copy of the documents from my coffee table. So, let's be clear about what's happening. You wanted the cabin for Liv, you have it. The deed is in your name now. Congratulations, you are all homeowners. You are also responsible for the property taxes from this day forward. And the gift tax, of course. Oh, and the property itself is currently classified as uninhabitable, so you'll have fun getting permits to make it livable again. I then slid the invoice for my labor across the table. And this is the bill for my services. 5 years of work. If you believe it's family property, then surely you believe in compensating a family member for their professional labor. You can pay it, or Catherine will be placing a lien on your primary residence. The choice is yours. My father stared at the invoice, his face turning a mottled shade of red. My mother looked like she was going to faint. Olivia just stared at me, her mouth hanging open. The fight seemed to drain out of them, replaced by the cold, hard shock of consequences. They had never faced consequences before, not from me. Get out, I said, my voice quiet but unyielding. The trespass notice applies to my apartment too. Get out of my home. For the first time in my life, they did as I said. They turned, defeated, and walked out of my apartment, leaving the door hanging open behind them. I closed it, locked it, and leaned my forehead against the cool wood. The confrontation was over. The bridges were burned. And I was finally completely free. The week that followed was one of deafening silence. The barrage of angry texts and calls ceased completely. It was as if a switch had been flipped. The silence from them was more telling than their rage had been. It was the silence of people grappling with a reality they couldn't bully or emotionally manipulate their way out of. I knew Catherine had received a call from a panicked, blustering lawyer my father had hired. According to her, the conversation was short. Catherine calmly laid out the indisputable facts. The deed was in my name, the transfer was legal, the tax liability was real, and the lien for my labor was non-negotiable. My father's lawyer, apparently, had advised them that they had no case. About 10 days after the confrontation, I received a certified letter. It was from my parents' lawyer. Inside was a check for the full amount on my invoice. There was no note, no apology, just the cold, hard transaction. They had paid me. It wasn't the victory I thought it would be. It felt hollow, a final, transactional end to what was supposed to be a family relationship. But it was also a validation. They had, in their own way, admitted that my work had value. The real resolution, however, came from an unexpected source. 2 weeks later, an email appeared in my inbox from a name I didn't recognize. The subject line was, Silver Lake Property. My heart skipped a beat. I opened it. It was from a real estate agent. Dear Ms. Evans, it began. I am writing on behalf of my clients, Carol and David Evans, regarding the property at 114 Willow Lane on Silver Lake. They have decided to sell the property and have asked me to inquire if you would be interested in purchasing it back from them before we list it publicly. Given your history with the property, they thought you should have the first right of refusal. I stared at the email, a slow, wry smile spreading across my face. It was perfect. They couldn't afford the taxes. They couldn't afford the renovations. They couldn't even stand to own the monument to their own greed and stupidity. The cabin, their grand prize for Olivia, had become a toxic asset, a financial black hole they were desperate to escape. I called Catherine. You're not going to believe this, I said, and read her the email. She let out a low whistle. They're waving the white flag, Maya. What do you want to do? My first instinct was to say no, to let them struggle to sell a worthless, stripped-down shell on the open market. But then I thought about the land, the stone paths I had laid, the terraced gardens that would soon be overgrown, the view of the water from the spot where the deck used to be. I had created that place. It was still, in its soul, mine. Catherine, I said, a new plan forming, one born not of anger but of shrewd business sense. Draft a response. Offer them a price. What price? She asked. The assessed value from the second report, I said. The post-removal value, the value of the land and the uninhabitable structure, not a penny more. Catherine laughed, a genuine, delighted laugh. Oh, this is beautiful. You're buying back your own land at a bargain basement price after they paid you for the renovations. Exactly, I said. They created this mess. They can pay to get out of it. The offer was sent. They accepted it within the hour. The closing was swift and impersonal, handled entirely through our lawyers. I used a portion of the money they had paid me from the labor invoice for the down payment. In a stunningly ironic twist of fate, they had essentially paid me to take the cabin back. A month after the baby shower, I drove back out to the lake. I stood on the porch of my cabin once again. It was a hollowed-out ghost of what it had been. The wind whistled through the empty window frames. The subfloor was bare and dusty. But as I looked out at the water, at the land that I had shaped and loved, I didn't feel loss. I felt peace. I had the salvage, all my beautiful materials, waiting in a storage unit. I had the knowledge, the skill, and the will to rebuild. But this time, I would build it differently. I would install better locks. I would build a fence, and I would build it only for me. The family property was dead. My sanctuary was about to have its rebirth. Rebuilding the cabin was different from the first time. The first time had been an act of hopeful creation, a naive effort to build something beautiful that I assumed my family would respect, even if they didn't understand it. This time, it was an act of defiant reclamation. It was a project fueled by a newfound sense of self-worth and ironclad boundaries. I hired Mark Jensen's crew again, but this time, it was for construction, not destruction. They worked with a newfound respect for me, calling me boss with genuine admiration. We didn't just rebuild, we improved. We installed a state-of-the-art security system. We used the lumber from the old deck to build a beautiful new pergola in the garden. The French doors, the kitchen island, the bathroom sink, they all found their way back to their rightful places, like pieces of a puzzle clicking back into place. The silence from my family continued. I heard through the grapevine of distant relatives that Olivia had had her baby, a boy. I felt a distant, detached sort of happiness for her, the kind you might feel for a stranger. But there was no card, no call. The chasm between us was too wide to cross. They had made their choice at that baby shower, and I had made mine in the hours that followed. 6 months after I reclaimed the deed, I was sitting on my new, reinforced deck, watching the sunset paint the lake in hues of orange and purple. The cabin was finished, more beautiful and more secure than ever before. My phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Hello. Maya, the voice was hesitant, fragile. It was Olivia. I was silent for a moment. Liv, I finally said, my voice neutral. Hi, she said, and I could hear the sound of a baby cooing in the background. I know it's been a while, I saw a picture of the cabin online. A real estate site still had the old listing up from when you bought it. The before pictures, she paused. And then I remembered what it looked like at the party. Before. I never really looked before. I never really saw all the work you did. I waited, saying nothing. It was beautiful, Maya, she whispered, and her voice cracked. What you built was so beautiful, and we just took it, or we tried to. I'm so sorry. It was the first apology I had ever received from her in my entire life. It wasn't a magic wand. It didn't erase years of hurt or mend the deep fractures in our family. But it was a start. A tiny, flickering candle in a vast darkness. Thank you for saying that, Liv, I said softly. We talked for a few more minutes about the baby, about her new life as a mother. She sounded different, tired but grounded. The bubbly, entitled influencer was gone, replaced by a young woman struggling with the realities of parenthood. Maybe, just maybe, she was finally starting to understand. I don't know what the future holds for my family. Maybe one day, my nephew will come to visit the cabin. Maybe he'll sit on the dock I built twice and learn to love the lake. But I know that if he does, it will be on my terms. It will be because he was invited into my home, not because his family tried to steal it for him. The sun finally dipped below the horizon and the first stars began to appear in the sky. I thought about that telescope I had wanted as a little girl. My parents had thought an encyclopedia was a better investment, but they were wrong. The encyclopedia told you about the world as it was. A telescope lets you see what's possible. I finally got my telescope. I bought it last week. And from the deck of my cabin, my sanctuary, my fortress, I can finally see the rings of Saturn, clear as day. So to the YouTube audience listening to this, I ask you, when someone shows you, over and over, who they are, believe them. But more importantly, when you show them who you are, strong, capable, and unwilling to be a doormat, make sure they believe you too. What would you have done in my situation? After listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind. Every day on Reddit, new X. Experiences and moments create fresh stories. We are all human. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon.